Good evening, everyone. It is March 16, 2013, and tonight we are talking about Google Reader. We're talking about the Samsung Galaxy S4. We're talking about the iWatch, and we're talking about how technology impacts and affects the mainstream. This is the iMore Show. Joining me today is Clayton Morris, tech expert and anchor at Fox News. How are you, Clayton?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I love the dual role that you fill, because if anyone follows you on Twitter, they see just, your average, I don't want to say average, your high order bit tech geek. But then on Fox, you take all this stuff and you package it and you explain it to people like my mom, and they suddenly feel empowered about the stuff that they're using.
Well, thank you. It's very nice of you to say. I get a lot of viewers that say the same thing, and I'm flattered by, our viewers who write me and say, I never understood technology until you started explaining it to me a few years ago when I started at Fox. And that really means a lot to me, because a lot of this stuff, when you and I are talking about eye scrolling on the Samsung Galaxy S4, to the average person, that sounds sort of science fiction-like. Yeah. Is it practical? Is it something they're ever actually going to use? Maybe, but for the most part, probably not. It sounds great to make headlines in the tech press, but not for my mom.
Well, and I think Ford has explained this to us in the past, too, that people get scared of technology. Like, if you say your car is going to drive yourself, to an average person, that's, rise of the machines.
Right. And it's very, and it's easy for then, I think, a lot of the mainstream press to latch on to that. And, I'll see this when I'm flipping through other channels, hopefully not mine, but I'll see this on other channels where they tend to sort of play up those ridiculous headlines, right? I think we saw this a few years ago with Google Street View. Yeah. But yeah, some of the self-driving cars that drive themselves. Is this the apocalypse? More after the break, No, actually, it'll make us safer, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's just it. It's this almost, they feel, I guess traditional technology was alienating to a lot of people. I know when my mom sat down in front of even a Mac, she wouldn't really understand why there were multiple windows or why she had a file system or where her files went. It was all very abstract to her. But now with her iPad, and I keep saying this, it's just home button app, home button app, home button app, and iCloud takes care of everything.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's why the appeal, of iOS is for the likes of someone like my father, who had suffered a stroke years ago. And not to say that iOS is for people that have had strokes, but the simplicity of it. So for him, he doesn't need to do all of the customizable options that you'd get perhaps with Android and sharing data between applications and stuff like that. I handed him an Android phone early on because I wanted to see which phone he needed for his real estate business. He needed a smartphone, and he didn't want to go the route of BlackBerry, so it was either going to be an Android phone. I think I gave him a Sprint, I think it was Sprint Instinct at one point to play with, and an iPhone. And he couldn't figure out the Android phone. I mean, it was a non-starter for him. And he figured out the iPhone, and within a few days he was texting and sending photos and taking photos of the property and sharing them with his listing agent folks back at the office. It was pretty great.
Yeah, it was one of the interesting things to me is after the iPad came out, a lot of people tried to compete on it based on being more like a desktop. Look, here's your icons. You can have multiple windows. You can run Flash. You can do all these desktop things. And nobody bought them. And I wonder if that's because people didn't want a traditional computer on their laps.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think when you have that start menu, you begin to think that you're back at your computer. And I don't know about you, but I mean, I do know you, and I knew you have a standing desk, right?
Yep.
So we're trying to get away from just sitting there staring at these screens for so long. And I think when we get in those environments where we see that start menu and we see that same file system, we get, I don't know, I want to say bored with it, or we just feel like it's work.
Yes. We're stuck once again back in front of that machine. We're not sort of liberated or disintermediated from it.
Right. And being able to do simple things with certain apps. I like looking up, I have an affinity for real estate, and I like looking through, like I'll jump on Trulia, a great app for real estate on the iPad. And it's so much more fun to sit there. I mean, if you actually look at, here's a good example for your audience. Download the Trulia app on your iPad and delete it if you don't want it later. But you can see the value of your home, by the way. And then play with that experience. Type in that you're looking for real estate in in Philadelphia or whatever part of up in Canada, wherever you are,
Yep.
and see what you find. And then jump over the web experience on Trulia.com. And you'll not on the iPad, try it just on your desktop, and it's a world of difference. It's as if they've let the website languish,
Yep.
and the app is fantastic.
Well, Instagram was app only for a long time.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And you couldn't, even if you went to Instagram.com, it was just, what would it give you? It wouldn't even give you your photos, right? It would give you...
You could get one static link to a photo, but then you were that was all you could do.
That's all you could do, right? It's kind of like what Path does, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And we're a website. iMore.com is a website, but we made an app because increasingly people go to apps now instead of the web, and that's a huge transformation from a few years ago.
I'm really curious about that because when you guys rolled out the 2.0 update, was it last week?
Yes.
I immediately downloaded it, and where I might miss it, because I know we're going to talk about RSS in a little bit, but where I might miss some of your stories throughout the day, I'm just busy. I don't think to hop into my reader feeds and that sort of stuff because to me it feels like work.
Yes.
But when I launched the iMore app on my iPhone and I'm just killing some time, I'm able to quickly read a story, and it's fun for me.
Yeah.
It's laid out in sort of a fun little candy-like way of consuming the news, like eating a Skittle.
Well, one thing we notice is that a lot of our audience, especially the iPhone, because it's so mainstream, a lot of them just it doesn't even occur to them to go to the app. They go to the App Store. And if we're not in the App Store, then they just never find us.
Right, and like FoxNews.com. I'd much rather go to the Fox News app and get a quick link to a video piece that I've just done, a tech piece that I've just done for the channel, or maybe a segment from earlier in the show. There's very often when I'm on the train coming home after a show and viewers are writing me saying, "Hey, I missed your Spring Break Gadget segment. Can you tweet it out for us? We can't find it. I'm trying to find it on the website. We can't find it." Yeah. And if you go to like FoxNews.com, there's a ton of things there, and so it's just easier to navigate. And I'll find it right on the app and just tweet it out right from the app, and it's boom, it's done.
It's that thing, I think John Gruber described it well, where he said instead of going to HTTP, you're going to these HTTP apps. They're basically websites that are fed by data, and then they have this custom interface for mobile. And those mobile-friendly interfaces are proving much more engaging than just the old browser, four-squared browser.
Right. Yeah, it's true. And even some of the web apps that are available for iOS, I find rather enjoyable. I mean, I know that was maybe probably the first move from Apple in the beginning to try to get web apps only, and there wasn't the sort of back-end architecture to build out apps. And maybe we're starting to see some of that now, in the Springboard problems and the way in which Android lets you do more of that. But even some of the web apps I enjoy using.
And I find it interesting that Apple, because you think of Apple as this monolith, like you should go to the App Store, but now there are iBooks in Flipboard because Apple realizes that, like any company, they have to go to where their readers are. You're going to where your viewers are. You can't expect everyone to come running for you, so you make it increasingly easier for them to engage.
Yeah, I would hope. It is interesting. That gave me a little bit of hope with iBooks coming to Flipboard because, as you know, my app, I really would love to get. That's one thing we're working on really hard right now to try to find the proper book solution because so many people have been demanding that they want to speed read books. Yep. And so we're working on that very hard right now.
Can we just back up for a second? You have Read Quick, and you were teasing it the last time you were on. You couldn't really talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
Much. Yeah, so can you just tell us a little bit? I mean, I've been using it all the time. I find it almost like gamified article reading, and I thought it was a brilliant idea.
Well, thank you. We're going to try to add more gamification things to the app, which let you speed read. So it's the idea that one word on a screen at a time. You can, pull in your Pocket feed, your Instapaper feed. We have a built-in browser, so you could, navigate over to iMore.com and pick the article that you want. Plus, there's a view source article right there, so you could tap on the article, takes you right back to iMore. But what we found is overwhelmingly people have been writing us saying we want an iPhone version. I said, well, it's a small operation. We don't have a big development house. It's like I funded it myself. It's not. We'll get there. So iPhone is coming, but people have been saying, I really would love to get books in there. And I've heard from a lot of professors that said that they've figured out a way to put books in there now by just using the built-in browser, doing an EPUB format, getting chapter by chapter. And so he has a whole class. Certain classes are reading, all of Jane Eyre in Read Quick. And I was blown away by this. So I really would love to try to find a way, and if Apple would be willing, to bring in iBooks. But, again, with the Flipboard issue with iBooks, right, it's only a link to It's not the full book. You just get sort of a placard,
Yeah.
right, with sort of the description. But it gave me hope.
Well, I mean, Apple hasn't even moved iBooks to the Mac yet. I'm not sure what the holdup is, but they've been keeping it incredibly locked to the iBooks app on iOS for now.
I'm sure you've heard the same thing, and my sources at Apple have told me that there has been an internal conflict about this issue, this very question, for a long time as it relates to iBooks on the Mac. And what I've heard is that this was a Steve Jobs thing. He did not want iBooks on the Mac. He believed that iBooks should be held in your hand on an iPad, and this is one of those things where I think that this causes problems for Apple as it relates to iTunes education.
Yeah.
iTunes U, because look, my wife is getting her MBA right now, and she takes copious amounts of notes in her books, and so she, as a result, uses certain apps like Kno. For textbooks. She also, uses Kindle if there are certain books that are available there, and so she's taking tons of notes. And you have Kindle on the Mac. You have Kindle on the PC. You can take notes, have access to all your notes. And wouldn't it be great if iTunes U or iBooks in general were there on the Mac?
Absolutely.
Maybe I need to take some notes, and I have my computer here, and I'm writing a paper, right? And I just need that maybe one column view of my book on the left side, and I need Pages open on the right, and I just need to copy and paste some text for my book.
Or I bought Astonishing X-Men, and boy, would I love to see that on one of those 27-inch screens.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, you could have 2-page, or you could have, well, how could you do that? Because I have the 27-inch iMac that I'm talking to you with right now.
Yeah.
So you could have you could have
2 pages,
huge panels. That'd be gorgeous.
Yeah, especially now because they've got Retina quality graphics. It would really hold up well.
Or you can even turn it to portrait mode.
Yeah.
And get 2 iMacs and staple them together.
See, Apple gets to sell more iMacs this way. They got to do it.
Right. Hey, and that's my point about Read Quick, Rich, is why wouldn't you want to be able to sell books more quickly, right?
Yes.
Because if I had books in my app, which I'm hoping to very soon, and we may have another solution in place, I mean, if I can, instead of taking a month to read that big historical book, like over my shoulder here in my office, I could read it in a week.
Yes.
And so you'd sell more books. So it's a matter of convincing.
Yeah, I think these things are, iTunes extras still don't work on the Apple TV, and you think of all places you want your DVD extras on your Apple TV. So it looks like...
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, you have to download them onto your Mac and then watch them.
That's right.
Yeah, which is odd. It looks like there's all these pieces in play, but they just either haven't had time or they haven't had the corporate coordination to get them all properly spread out.
And I would have thought maybe we would see if there's going to be some sort of spring event for Apple. I would have thought, well, this is what they did last year. There was the spring event where we had an Apple TV refresh.
Yes.
Where we saw MLB was brought to the platform. We saw was it the A5?
Yeah.
The A5 processor was in there.
1080p.
I thought maybe this, I would have thought, hey, this would have been an opportunity for a spring event, maybe it's Apple TV related. But we just had that refresh, that sort of quiet update. So to me, I wonder if that's going to mean that there's going to be no mention of Apple TV.
Yeah, the only thing I've heard is that maybe that'll be a fall project, and then MG had that story about a possible or at least some form of an SDK.
Right.
Build on it.
Yeah, and I have heard about that. I think you and I maybe even talked about that before, which is, I am aware that there has been a move towards that. I thought it would have happened a long time ago. I thought for sure we were going to see it last summer.
It seems like similar to Siri that they've been using a channel partner strategy where they make special agreements with Wall Street Journal or MLB or Hulu and then create an app almost like they did with Google and YouTube on the original iPhone. And if you open up an API, then anyone can make an app and they lose the value of those partnerships. I don't know if there's some sort of discussion going on over that.
I do find it frustrating. I used to think that Apple TV was the answer, or not the answer, at least as close to the answer as possible. But I really go back and forth between, I play with a lot of these, of course, the Western Digital. What's the name of it now? The Play, just got it a few weeks ago.
I got Roku stuck in my brain now.
Yeah, Roku, and then this new Western Digital box that just came out a few weeks ago, and it has, Slingbox, so I use the Slingbox. And, there's some great apps in there, and the interface is really nice. And you have those extra apps available. Plus, they have their own sort of customizable things. It also has external storage. So if I wanted to throw a whole bunch of movies on a little hard drive and plug it in over USB and had, 100 gigabytes of kids episodes of Curious George and Superman and whatever, Have Gun Will Travel. I'll carry that thing, shove that right in the side of it, and I've got access to it. With Apple TV, I'm limited by like the Wall Street Journal Live, which if you've ever watched, it's pretty bad.
Yes.
And it's people who are print trying to do television. It's not all that great.
Awesome.
But I just find it weird that that's one of the apps featured on on the Apple TV. Like this, it doesn't seem like it would even pass muster.
And it's odd because you still can't, for example, search across. Like if I have content, Roku did this well. You can just type in a name of a movie and it'll show you everywhere that it's available. You can stream from Netflix or Amazon or buy from here. And on the Apple TV, I can't just type in a movie and say you can buy it from iTunes, stream it from Netflix, watch it from here. Everything is its own little silo still.
Right. And you're having to use apps like, have you ever used the app Can You Stream It?
Yeah. Or
canyoustream.it? And you're having to like rely on apps like that. So you type in Challenge of the Super Friends. You want to find out, I can't watch it on Netflix. Maybe it's on Hulu. Maybe I can just get clips on Hulu, but it'll show you, you need to buy that in iTunes. That's your only choice.
I don't know if you've ever tried it, but a lot of people still kept the old Apple TV because you can jailbreak it and put XBMC on it.
Yeah.
And when you can see what a box that small can really do, I mean, it can just pull all the live internet television channel feeds. It can let you search across everything. It can take all the media that's on your server and just throw it up on your TV for you. You can see how many almost artificial limitations are still in place.
It is true. I did jailbreak my Apple TV back in the day and loved it.
Yeah.
And it was sort of sad to see it go. Of course, that thing was a heat box. I mean, I literally could put like Pop-Tarts on top of it, and they'd be toasted and done. I thought the house was going to explode.
Yes.
That thing was so hot.
Yeah, I hope we get to a point where both Hollywood is comfortable enough and Apple is open enough to, well, not Apple, but all the manufacturers are open enough to give us sort of that a la carte on-demand future of media that we kind of strive for.
What do you think's missing? I really, this is a space that really interests me. And anytime I see an article on, TV streaming, the future of it, Lex Friedman, I think at Macworld a few weeks ago, had a great piece on who could win the streaming war. And it was a thought piece just about all of the different services that are out there. I don't know that it arrived at a solution. I mean, I guess the solution really is live, right? I mean, Xbox. Well, I should say Xbox has, ESPN Live and those sorts of things in there. If you have a subscription and you pay for the Xbox Gold subscription, BoxyBox has Live now with a dongle, so you can get over-the-air streaming, which is great. I've been using that, and it works great. Really works great. You can plug it right into your cable and stick that little the BoxyBox Live dongle out of it. But again, that's just a herky-jerky solution that, like I said, my mom's never going to do that.
It's not mainstream yet.
No.
Yeah, and then
so I think maybe live.
Yeah, I think if you could just convince everyone to make it all available and set your price. And if you're nervous about something, like they have that crazy box that scans your retina and then lets you watch current movies for $500.
Right.
I mean, that kind of stuff, it's odd, but I like that feature. Just show me the content, tell me what the price is, and if it's convenient and fair enough, I'll just buy it. And then I don't have to search everywhere for it. It's all in one place. Like music, now I think music has reached that, but I think only music has gotten there.
I mean, the only reason we have cable, we never watch. The only reason we have cable is because of my job. Yeah, and so my wife on the weekends likes to watch my show in the mornings and watch Fox and Friends in the morning. And that's the only reason we have cable. Otherwise, we are watching video podcasts of particular news programs that we want. Like if I want to watch like the PBS NewsHour, I throw that, there's a PBS app on my iPad. I'll AirPlay that right to my Apple TV if I want to watch that. Or we're buying and watching television seasons. Either that or we're watching them through Netflix. So if I want to watch Downton Abbey or which we're obsessed with, or Justified, or
I'm watching Arrow on the CTV app. Whatever
Canadian really?
network licensed it. Yeah, I just watched it, and that's one of the few network apps that allows AirPlay. So I started on the iPad, hit the AirPlay button, it's on my television.
That's great.
And it's always this week's episode.
Yeah, Hulu has Arrow, and I love it. And and there again, so if I want to just these particular shows that are coming out that I'm hearing about, like I heard last night that David Mamet is working on a remake, and I'm a huge Western fan, and he's working on a remake of this classic 1957 Western, Have Gun Will Travel.
Yes.
And, I'm like, oh, that's great. I don't care about watching anything else on CBS other than Letterman or something. I just would love to watch that show. Yeah. Give it to me. I don't care. I'll pay for it. Let me choose to pay for it. I'll pay $30 for the run of it, and when it's done, it's done.
I hope we get there. We're sort of struggling around it. One of the other things I thought was interesting this week is Google decided to shutter Google Reader, and they're actually killing Google Reader faster than they're killing iGoogle, which makes absolutely no sense to me. But come July 1st, and I don't know if you're like me, I almost never used Google Reader, the website, but I used it to sync every RSS app that I owned on every device.
Right.
And now that's all going away.
It's something that you don't ever see, but you know it's there. And to me, I'll just say that the comfort of it, like my wife heard about it, and I was up here in my office doing some work. I was like editing a photo or something, so I was knee deep in Lightroom and wasn't reading news. And suddenly my wife bursts in and she says, "They're killing Google Reader." And I don't know of anyone in my close circle who relied on Google Reader more than she did. And certainly when she was at CNET back in the day and she was preparing for her shows every day, I mean, she was a Google Reader, pro.
Yeah.
And so this was her source, and she was devastated by it. And it's the comfort of knowing that sort of back end service is there.
Yeah.
And that all of these other apps just can pull from it. And you just don't ever think that these types of services are going to go away because it's Google, right? Or are they going to pull it? Well, yes, I guess they pulled Google Health that we relied on.
It's like power. I mean, it becomes exactly what you said. Like it's like the power. When it goes out, you think that the world has disappointed you.
Right. Yeah, but then, you see now, I think, what's interesting. So I'm not too devastated by it because you've seen some innovation already pop up. Dig Reader, Dig says, that they're moving forward with their own reader client, which will be more social in the way that we use news these days, Twitter and Facebook and the like. So I'll be curious to see what Dig Reader does in that space. Feedly, I've been using Feedly now more and more, and I have to admit I've been using the Google Chromebook, the Pixel, in tests over the past few weeks. And I've been enjoying it with all of its limitations. But I've installed Feedly in Chrome on the Pixel, mm-hmm. and I like it. And I've done it on this iMac now and otherwise. And it's to me, what the difference is with Feedly and Google Reader is Feedly feels like it's fun.
Yes.
And I think you see this shift on the web, right, where you see a lot of these websites that are trying to look. I mean, you see the influence of mobile.
Yeah, it's the appification of the web.
Right. And so Feedly is fun, right? It's presents it in a nice sort of magazine style. I actually have Feedly open right at the moment. I see some iMore articles I have here in my technology folder. And it makes it very nice. Nice images right there. And where I opened Google Reader, I felt it looked like garbage.
Well, I think it looked like Soviet-era technology, but it was as reliable as Soviet-era technology. It just worked, and it became infrastructure for us. I never looked at it, but anytime I had to review an RSS app, I would log in with Google Reader, and I didn't have to import all my feeds or remember them or try to find them. I was set up in 2 seconds. And I think the fear now is that Google obliterated the market. No one else bothered making a sync service, and people like NetNewsWire canceled theirs because Google did it for free and so well. And now that's gone. So people have to scramble to do it, and we might get different standards now so that our things aren't compatible anymore.
Right. Why would you want to compete with free? And it turns out, I mean, if you're going to have any sort of a startup that's going to devote themselves to dealing with RSS, and you're going up against Google as a behemoth and offering this free service that just works and works great, and everyone's using it for podcasts and everything else, why would you try to compete with it? And now I think it's exciting that we're going to see some innovation here. But it turns out, free is difficult, right? Because it's not free for Google.
Yes.
You still have a team devoted to working on Reader. And you see this now with Larry Page trying to really streamline Google and taking a page from Steve Jobs' playbook, right, when he came back to Apple, getting rid of all the extra SKUs that were in place. Why do we have this? Why do we have the Newton? Why do we have all these things? Let's get down to the core. What do we do? What do we do and what do we do well? And all these extraneous services that are out there, Google Reader, Google Health. Did he kill Google Health or was Google Health before him?
I'm not
sure if he killed it.
He was still involved, so you might have.
Right.
But the thing that's interesting to me is that Google conditioned us to think of free or cheap as in your data. So they would give us almost anything to use as long as they could harvest stuff in return. And a lot of us were, completely fine with that. And now Google is putting out $1,400 computers that are more expensive than Photoshop than the CS6 suite that can't run it. They're putting out the Google Q. That's, this box that you still need an Android phone to run. They're putting out Google Glass that you have to, so far, do a contest to even buy. And I think if Apple did these things, we say, oh, that's kind of expensive, but there goes Apple again. But when Google starts doing it, it's a conflict with our expectations.
It is true because we think of Google as the search as the search king.
They just give me cheap stuff.
Right. And hey, all right, they're giving me cheap stuff. I've got Gmail, and all right, maybe there's going to be some ads popping up in line, and yeah, maybe they're harvesting some of my data, but it's a great service. I can set all kinds of filters that I can't do in any other email service as well. It just works. It's stable. It never has a problem. And yes, maybe there's an outage where it's down for 10 minutes and the world cries. But God, my train is late, like twice a week. So, we don't cry. We expect it, right? In sort of infrastructure. So I think it is odd. I think you see that, see the shift away now when Google sorts of, this week was interesting with Android, and you see Google focusing on sort of their core infrastructure again, Google Chrome, and moving away from, or at least it seems like moving away from Android with Andy Rubin leaving. I feel to me it feels like Andy Rubin had a baby. The baby grew up to be 18 and is off to college, and that baby is now out of his hands.
Yeah.
Right. It's been taken over by the likes of Samsung and HTC, and that baby, really doesn't look like his baby anymore.
It's interesting to me because Apple got rid of Scott Forstall was let go. The guy who was in charge of mobile was let go, and iOS was given to the guy who was in charge of desktop. It was given to Craig Federighi, who already had OS X. Andy Rubin was sort of let go, and Android was given over to the guy who was in charge of Chrome and Google Apps, which is sort of the desktop. And it seems like even though everyone keeps saying mobile is the future, these baby operating systems that are now mature are being handed over to the traditional departments to sort of run. I thought that was an unusual move.
Yeah, and why do we think that is? I'd love to. I've been really thinking about that hard this week because you're right. I mean, we kept hearing, the operating system on the desktop is the truck, and yeah, we're going to need them. We're going to need them once in a while to haul some lumber. But for the most part, we've got the computer in our pocket, and that's the future. And you see this blending now between iOS. I know that your friend and mine, Alex Lindsay, has long been saying that eventually, and maybe very soon, we're going to see a very similar looking operating system across all of Apple's products. And we're starting to see it bit by bit. And you certainly see that with Mountain Lion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Guy English had a really good take on it. He was saying that you're kind of passing along the stewardship to people who know how to do more complex, more mature systems. They were these skunkwork projects, and it took an incredible act of will and an ability to throw away everything else and re-architect and start from scratch to birth these systems. But now they're being given to the guys who know how to manage platforms.
That's an interesting way to put it. I think he's probably onto something. And there's still some, significant limitations as it relates to mobile. Some things that I find that I'm continually frustrated by that I just cannot do. I know we often hear, that the iPad, of course, is it's a consumption device only. It's not a production device. And I have to say that that's not the case. I take a lot of photos, and I've fallen in love with photography over the past year and doing quite a bit of photo editing now, specifically on the iPad. Yep. Whether it's doing a couple of things, launching Snapseed to, do some different blending or do some different things, maybe opening up iPhoto to do some layers or do some retouching, maybe opening up even Photoshop on the iPad, which is great, and able to do layers, bring in multiple layers and actually blend in. It's something you can really only do, on a computer. But there still are major limitations with that, right? Like I can't import raw photos.
Yeah.
So I don't have the storage capacity on mobile that I can on the desktop. And I don't know how long that's ever going to take.
Yeah, I guess that's the cloud fantasy. That thin client they've been talking about for years, where all our stuff just lives on the cloud, and then we just surface the instance of it on whatever we're working on. But it always seems like it's coming, but we're never quite reliable enough to have it yet.
Right. I mean, I think with these large files, I think we're years away from that. Maybe not years away, but years away from reliability on that, where I can have, large albums of raw photos stored in the cloud. I mean, the amount of time it takes to upload that over a traditional, unless I'm lucky enough to have Google Fiber or Fios in my house, if I've got, 5 megabytes up, good luck with that. It'll take you all day.
LTE, and you have a 5 gig limit.
Right, yeah, and then you're hitting your bandwidth caps, and so you're not. So I think we're years away from that being practical. Whether it's even video files, we see this shift towards all of this video and high definition video, and trying to upload that, download that, manage all of those video files and large photo files and other things. We're years away from that, and I even think some of the book files. I mean, look, we're seeing this move towards iTunes U and these iBooks that have, like our friend David Sparks, who has this paperless book that has huge video files in there, and so I don't know how many megabytes his book is, but it's large, but it's worth it. But it's not just a text file.
Well, I've seen that too. People press the button to download, and then they're wondering, why is it? Because they're used to like books taking a couple of seconds to download. Like what's this? Even some of the app books, like they make some. My godchildren love the Avengers app books, and they press a button to download them, and that thing goes really slowly in front of them because they're getting animation and built-in mini games and.
Right, and Stan Lee's voice and everything else. So, yeah.
I mean, it's hefty. You mentioned the Pixel before, and I'm interested in your take on that because I've tried just living in a browser, both on the iPad in Safari and on my MacBook Air in Chrome, and I can last maybe 10 minutes and I want to launch Photoshop or I want to launch InDesign or something. And I know I'm not the target market, but do you think we're sufficiently advanced yet that you can just live in the cloud?
But see, I think you are the target market, and that's where I think the Pixel fails.
Okay.
Right? If you're spending $1,400 on a laptop with a Retina display, beyond Retina display, you want to launch Photoshop.
I do.
I want to launch Lightroom.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to be in there editing and taking like 5 bracketed photos and pulling up Photoshop Bridge and running it through Photoshop and doing layer work and then being able to pull up Photomatics and do different things. And I can't. Yeah. And so to me, it doesn't make sense. I mean, we saw these commercials back in the day for Chromebooks as these disposable things, like disposable razors almost, where they had like a dog basically urinating on them because they're like, hey, who cares if your dog urinates on a Chromebook? Just buy another one.
Buy 1,000 of them for a school in Kenya or something.
Right. Yeah. So I really think you are the target market for it. I think I am the target market for it, but it doesn't make sense. I think I don't think they understood their audience here because, if I'm going to spend $1,400 on a computer, I'd likely buy, or maybe go a little bit higher and buy a MacBook Pro with a Retina display, and then I've got an SSD drive in there, which of course the Pixel does. But I have, I have the ability to store. Like I took my MacBook Pro, 15-inch Retina MacBook Pro to New Zealand a few weeks ago, and I shot 3,500 photos.
Wow.
Now, many of those were bracketed photos, but they were all raw files. Okay, so you know how large those are, and I shot them with my Nikon D800. Okay. So they're 36 megapixels, and I stored all of them. Now, I had to go through and use like Omni Disk Sweeper to clean out some cruft, but I stored all of those photos. Once I got my SD cards out for the day, I stored all of them on the MacBook Pro. Yeah. There's no way in the world I'd be able to do that on the Pixel. Yeah. And yes, I had a backup hard drive with me as well, so in case something happened, God forbid, to my computer, I wouldn't have lost the whole trip.
I had the same problem. I went to CES and I shot RAW with a Mark III, and I just kept it all on my MacBook. The
15-inch or the 13?
The 15-inch.
Yeah. And then I get back and I train. I've been able to go through in Lightroom with all my I have starred 5 stars or no stars, and these are the ones I want to edit, and just dump it off to a hard drive and right into my iMac, which is backed up to a Drobo, and I'm good to go. And it's all done over Thunderbolt, and I clean off that Retina MacBook Pro, and I'm ready to go again.
It's an amazing workflow, and yeah, I think you're right. I don't think the web-only workflow works for people who want to, and I hate the words like create content or professional level content, but I think if you're doing heavy lifting, you still need those trucks. There's just no.
Yeah, and one other thing stood out to me. Certain like browser extensions, things that I need. Like 1Password. Yeah. Little things like that I rely on. For my computing needs every day, and I found that I kept having to like pull out. Unless you found a way around this, unless I was syncing wrong, but I trying to find like 1Password for Chrome OS. I mean, you can certainly do it for Chrome, but not Chrome OS.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And I don't think 1Password. At least I couldn't get it in there unless. And I played with it for a little while, but it was frustrating to me because all of my I don't know these weird JKILT passwords that 1Password generates.
And I kept having.
I kept having to pull out my iPhone and jumping on 1Password on my iPhone to get my passwords to use them on the Chromebook Pixel.
Yeah.
So
I'm like you. I live in 1Password because all these services getting compromised lately. I went through and redid every password is now unique and a big random kludge of characters.
right.
It's yeah. I mean, we're living in this really strange time where we have all this technology, but it feels like we're just one or two steps away from it really coalescing into something interesting. I was at the Galaxy S3 event, the Galaxy S4 event, sorry, on Thursday. And it was really interesting to me because Samsung spent the event. It was in Radio City Music Hall. It was done like a 50s Broadway show. And they have a ton. In terms of features, the hardware features and software features are stupefying. But again, it's like this one step away where it's still in plastic. It's still got an OLED display. And the features, while interesting, they're like random words. There's no story. So it's almost impossible to even remember the many features that they have. And I like that approach is so different from Apple, that they're literally throwing everything at the wall, and Apple's very methodical about it. But I think we have too many extremes right now.
Yeah, we've got an IR blaster inside
Yes.
of it. You know, we've got I think there's a heat sensor inside of the
thermometer
S4
and humidity
too.
detector.
Right. So, in case that I'm stranded in the desert with Bear's Grill on an adventure, I have the temperature right in my pocket. Yeah, there are some interesting things, and I feel like they even shoved in the IR blaster just because the HTC, HTC just did that. So they're like, we got to shove that in there too. Let's do it.
Which our trios had, 10 years ago.
Right, right. So you're right, and I think also what bothered me about the event, beyond just the random features, was the lack of demonstrations about these things and the inability for us to really do much app testing.
Yeah.
And it really felt like things weren't done. At an Apple event, I mean, anytime I've been to an Apple event, the first, if there's a hands-on area, afterwards, if there's a demonstration area, it's, oh, by the way, we just want to let you know we have a hands-on demonstration area, and go on up and have fun. There's no limitations. The only limitations you'll get is if they don't want you to do a screenshot and use the built-in email client to email it to your blog back home so you can get it published. Other than that, they're like, hey, yeah, do a FaceTime call with your mom. Go ahead, or whatever you got to do, and it's done. Why can you do this? You know why? Because it's done.
Yeah.
And here it is. And you know what? We're a week away from shipping it.
Well, that's it. They announced the price and they announced the ship date, and there was really no pricing and no shipping dates. And I don't think it was final software for the GS4. I'm fairly convinced it wasn't final software.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Is it final software, or is it final and rough? Is it done? But
it was jank. It didn't scroll properly, so I'm hoping it's not final software.
Yeah, and it's running 4.2.2, but we're still about a month and a half away. So Apple tends to release their Gold Master maybe 3-4 weeks before launch date. So.
Well, they'll do it at the event, right? The Gold Master will come out at the event, and then the release version will come out with the device, or a day before 2 days before.
Like a week and a half later, right?
And I don't think Apple particularly cares about developers as much as they care about having those apps in the store, polished and ready to go. It's almost like an unpackaging experience. You get home, you unpack this beautiful box, you take out your device, and they want the store app experience to be as nice as you taking it out of the box experience.
Yeah, they want it to be done. They don't want, other than the first iPhone event where it's behind a glass cylinder that's rotating on the floor, it's done. Here, go play with it.
Yeah.
And have at it. Put it through all the tests you want, and the individual stand there next to you. This is one thing I always notice about these events, even at the BlackBerry event a few weeks ago, there are people there who don't know the answers.
Yes.
To the questions. And everyone around those tables at an Apple demonstration area for the press knows the answers.
Yeah.
And they're well versed on the software. And they can even if you throw sometimes they're stumped, but sometimes it's a very specific, nerdy question to be asking.
Yeah.
But most of the time they're pretty well versed on why this can't do this, or yes, this can do this, and here's how this works.
Yeah, they will probably not tell you what the CPU, what the clock speed is in the CPU and how much RAM is in it, but they will tell you how FaceTime works.
Right.
Whereas
I even remember the iPhoto demonstration on the iPad. I was at that event and then came out, and I couldn't wait to see how iPhoto was on the Retina iPad. God, this was going to be gorgeous, right? And what an amazing app. They spent like 20 minutes showing off iPhoto for the iPad, and it really is like a transcendent experience when you're able to edit photos like that on a tablet device. It really is amazing.
GarageBand too. I mean, that raised the level of mobile apps for a lot of people.
Yeah, both of those. I mean, they could have launched one of those apps that day, and I would have been blown away by it. But all the people that were in the demonstration area were well versed on all of those. Here's this brush, and here's why you want to use this with this filter, and try this over here with it. I'm like, geez, how'd you get that? You must not have any sleep lately.
They don't. Before the release cycle, I don't think anybody sleeps. But
yeah,
Samsung was better prepared this year. Their Galaxy S3 event was very awkward because it sounded like they were surprised by what happened on stage. And this year, at least, they seemed to know what the features were going to do when they demonstrated them. But the demos, instead of demos, they had these little skits, and they tried to show you contrived real-world experiences. But again, it was like, look, you can put your face in a picture with your family. And Phil Nickinson from Android Central sitting next to me goes, yeah, but how often am I going to want a postage stamp of my face on a family picture? It's not a... It's interesting choices. I wish Apple would do more, but at the same time, I don't see myself using half the stuff that some of these companies are putting in there.
It's true. You do get the sense that Samsung, I mean, we know that they've copied Apple in the past, but even their presentation, they're trying to highlight some of these marquee features that they know the press will jump onto and give them a lot of legs the following days in the press, right? So the eye scrolling. So if you picked up, I know you were in New York City, if you picked up the next day, the New York Post, huge headlines. It said iPhone, E-Y-E, phone, and it had a picture of the Samsung Galaxy. And that is honestly the first time I can remember on the front page of the New York Post there being any other phone besides an iPhone after an event. And, it said iPhone, and I think like the subtitle was like the phone you control with your eyes or something like that. And look, I don't know how often I'm going to ever use that feature. I like the idea that if I look away from a video, the video stops playing or pauses. But that can be frustrating because it didn't work very well. So every time I blink, is it going to stop?
And sometimes you want to keep listening while you're not, like you're working, you just want to listen and you want to look back all the time.
Yeah, I do that all the time. Like this morning I was watching something on PBS while I was getting ready for the show. And, I had the video version of the segment on, but then I sat it down and I was getting my tie and coat on and I just wanted to listen to it, Will it shut off? And
do I turn it on? Do I have to go into settings, enable, disable all the time?
Yeah.
The other thing I found interesting is that they got a little bit of Apple-style pushback. I remember last year, 2 years ago, when the iPhone 4S came out, people were like, oh, it's a 4S, it's boring. And now this year they got, oh, this is a Samsung Galaxy S3S. This is just an But, at the end of the day, these are phones, and they're so advanced that I don't know what the expectations are anymore. I think solid generational upgrades are what we're going to be getting.
I totally agree with you, and I was sort of trying to pull myself back, because Twitter can become a bit of a hive mind during tech events, and so I tried to pull back from it, and I was just sort of reading the response on Twitter as to what was going on, and what struck me the most about it was how quickly everyone was ready to say, oh, this is, evolutionary, not revolutionary, which is what we always hear around an Apple event. And I had tweeted that let's remember this in a few months at the end of the summer if we have the iPhone 5S, when everyone says, let me see this is what I said on my Twitter feed. Let's all remember this day when the iPhone 5S is faster, more powerful, has a better camera, but is yawn, not revolutionary. Because that's exactly what will be said, right? You have an incredibly successful phone in the Galaxy S3. Why reinvent the wheel for the Galaxy S4? Yes, the body's a little lighter and certainly a little lighter to the touch. It's faster. It certainly has more powerful processor. Yes, they threw a 13-megapixel camera in there.
5-inch
some other
1080p screen. I mean, that's pretty good boost.
Yeah, it's a nice boost. And so why do you need to reinvent the wheel every time?
I think it was silliest, and that was I wrote an article last week about the iPhone 5S problem, which some people thought was an Apple is doomed, but it was a criticism more of our media that the iPhone 5 came out and it looked like a rounded flat rectangle, but it was rebuilt literally from the atom up. It was a totally different redesigned phone that people who are machinists couldn't believe that Apple was able to produce, and the reaction was yawn boring. It looks the same.
Right. And you have to wonder what those engineers are thinking in the back rooms of Apple, thinking, God, we meant to get these chamfered edges. It's just gorgeous piece of industrial design. It feels light as a wafer, but super powerful. The camera is amazing, and people are yawning.
Yeah. I've be like, I'm taking it back. Fine, give it back. You can't have it anymore.
I think that you've been speaking to this on MacBreak and other places recently, and I think it's you and I have been going back and forth on Twitter on this a little bit, which is, what do we want? I mean, we don't know. I guess there are things we don't know we want, right?
Yeah.
We didn't know we wanted a smartphone like this. Perhaps we don't know that we want some sort of iWatch that's going to change our lives with all sorts of quantitative style testing of our body, our biological clock as we're walking around throughout the day. But at the end of the day, what more can you want from a phone? And what sort of improvements? Every year is not going to bring some revolutionary new iPhone.
Yeah, I mean, at the end, I'm waiting for the headline that says "boring, still a phone."
Right. I mean, you see this drift back to people just wanting to make a phone call and text, and get rid of everything else,
Well, there is that thing that we were talking about, whether phones have to be this thin or they could be a little bit thicker and have 2-day battery life, for example, and have much better cameras. Because thinness, I spoke with that with Anantech's Brian Klug last week. Cameras don't like thinness. Lenses like to have a good Z index for them to have all that glass in. So maybe there's eventually it'll never be an atom thin. So if we can agree that it'll never be as thin as an atom, at least maybe we can start getting some phones that are a little bit thicker, have much better cameras, much better battery life.
Yeah, all I want is better battery life at this point. I think that's the holy grail of mobile devices, and it's remarkable to me that I can go days without ever recharging my iPad Mini.
Yeah.
Of course, you much bigger device, but I can't make it through an afternoon with my iPhone 5 unless I've got a Mophie case on it, or unless I've got some juice at certain points during the day. I mean, I come home, I plug right in on my countertop. And when I'm at my office, I've got a little docking station on a stereo that I just plop it right on when I get to my office at work. And that little juice, maybe that's what helps me get through the day.
So I'm curious on your take. You mentioned the iWatch, and you've probably heard similar things that I have. That that Apple's working on something that'll be smaller, more wearable. If you consider the iPhone is not really a phone. It's a mobile device that has a phone app, and the iWatch, I'm guessing, will be a wearable device that has a watch app, but is a bunch of other things. Do you think that this might be more? This is a debate I keep going on with myself. Is going to be more like an Apple TV device that just increases the ecosystem, or will it be more like an iPhone device that maybe someone doesn't need a phone? Maybe my grandfather doesn't need a phone, but he wants something that will connect him or monitor health or something, and it's just one way to help spread technology to even more mainstream people.
Yeah, I think it's going to be simple. I mean, simple as can be. I think we're thinking there may be some great features in it for sort of the quantified life as we're talking about. So I've got this Fitbit in my pocket, and I'm standing here on a treadmill desk talking to you right now. It's not on, otherwise it'd be too loud. And I love those things, and I would love to not have to carry this in my pocket. And if it was always on my person, and I could see interesting data about myself, great. I can't imagine, though, that it would require you to have these other devices. I know Leo has said that he believes there's no way it would be able to work without having an iPhone on you. But that doesn't make any sense. I mean, I understand the idea behind it. It just doesn't seem like something Apple would do, right? I mean,
well, if you wanted an LTE radio, maybe you'd have to connect it to use an LTE radio or something. I think it'll change. If you look at the original iPhone compared to the iPhone 5, or even the original iPad compared to the iPad 4, you can see Apple had this vision, and they just couldn't technologically get there for a few generations. And maybe the iWatch version 1, they'll have to compromise because they don't have batteries that are powerful enough, or maybe the LTE radio can't fit in there yet. But I think generation 2, generation 3. It starts to become that more self-contained thing.
Right. So you're not having to rely on, with battery life and the size of the device, I've got iCloud, right? Yep. So I've got iTunes Match. So the way that you get songs on this device is iTunes Match. That's great. I'm an iTunes Match subscriber, and I'm out walking around, and if it had an LTE chip inside of it, and maybe they have some sort of, Amazon-style whisper sync, where you're paying, the built-in cost for LTE is in the purchase of the device. And you know what? We're not going to make you pay anything extra. The one cost covers it, and you can listen to as much music as you want. You can stream Pandora, but you're limited. You're not going to be reading email on here. You may get some notifications. If you sync it with your iPhone that you do have in your pocket, then you can see that you've got a push notification, and why not grab your iPhone to open it? It seems to me one of those things, though, that they're never going to, people talk about Steve Jobs not being around. I mean, their designers and their engineers are brilliant. And they're not stupid.
No slouch.
Right, he's no slouch, and he knows that people aren't going to want to read email on a watch, on a little tiny watch face. Maybe they will. I don't know, but I think
maybe Siri will handle that. Remember the iPod Shuffle? It had no buttons on it, and it just read you and listened to everything.
Right, you press that one little thing, and you could tell it what playlists to go. Double tapping took you to a playlist, but of course that was a bomb, and they ended up getting rid of that.
Really good accessibility features now, and we did an episode on Iterate about accessibility. And if you haven't listened to it, listen to it because it's really important. Not you, Clayton, but the audience listen. It's because it's really an important feature. But as much as we have glanceable data now, Apple's gotten very good at just reading you the parts that you need to hear about your data. And I could see that if it's in a watch and you don't want to. You're in public, it could, have the headset on, it could just feed you little bits. Email from Clayton, new version of Read Quick has just been released, that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. You set it. You might not even have to set all of it on the phone itself. Maybe the features are set on your iPhone, or maybe you're doing it on the web, on iCloud.com. And you're setting your features there, and or maybe you do it through iTunes. I hope that you wouldn't have to sync a watch through iTunes anymore. But I agree with you. I love to think about these sorts of things. I don't know that I will wear the watch though. I mean, do you wear a watch now?
I don't. I was just using my iPhone, and then I got the Nike Fuel Band that I was wearing for a while. But I've got so reliant on my iPhone that I just stopped wearing one.
Yeah, I was never. When I was a kid, I was a watch guy. I had my Mickey Mouse watch, and then I had a little Timex watch that I wore for years. But as I got older, and you drift towards the smartphone, can this device be compelling enough for our generation, or even a younger generation who probably never touches a watch? Will they buy a watch for the first time?
Well, that's the case. I mean, Steve Jobs came out on stage and with the original iPad and said, this is the smartphone and this is the computer. And if we're going to make this product, we have to convince you that you need something in between the laptop and the computer. And maybe will convince you need something that's smaller than the phone, or at least for people who want something smaller than the phone.
I can appreciate being able to glance, that sort of glanceable information. I want to glance down at some weather information. I think about like the Dark Sky app.
Yes.
Which is great, and for your audience that might not be familiar with that app, it hasn't had a lot of fanfare lately, but last year it did, and it's great. It was so pinpoint accurate that it would send out information that in 5 minutes it's about to rain. To be able to have that sort of glanceable information on a watch, because if I'm walking, I don't know sometimes that something's vibrated in my pocket, my iPhone, I can't feel it. My wife will say, "Didn't you get my text messages?" And I'll stop and I'll finally, look down and realize that she'd been texting me for the last 20 minutes of my walk. So to have something on my wrist where you have much more sensitivity, let's be honest, right? That's why moms test hot milk on their wrist, right? Because that's a very sensitive area of our body. So maybe we'll get that information. We'll be able to see dark sky pop up with an alert. Oh, it's going to rain in 5 minutes. I better get inside,
Yeah, one of the things that I like about the year that we're in right now is I saw the iPhone launch. It was for anyone who had a smartphone before the iPhone, it really was a revolution. And the Palm pre-launch I thought was really impressive as well, the original Android launch. But you kind of feel like smartphones are hitting their stride and we're getting those iterative ones, and there's not going to be that blow away moment again for a little while still. But now that everything is becoming mobile and wearable, and we might have an iWatch or Google Glasses, I think it's becoming exciting again just for technology lovers.
Yeah, I think it is. I love this. Again, I love having all of this extra data. I use one of the ARIA Fitbit scale and syncing over Wi-Fi. So every morning, after my shower, I get on the ARIA scale and it syncs over Wi-Fi to the Fitbit app, which runs on low-powered Bluetooth. And I've got the Fitbit in my pocket, so it syncs throughout the day, and I can see how many steps I've managed to make, and did I hit my 11,000 step goal for the day or whatever. And then to see that data on the web and see my weight loss. I saw when I had pneumonia last summer. In August, and I saw that I lost, if you look at the chart, it's interesting to see, I was here, and then I, dropped 5 pounds, on this chart. and then I can see where the holidays hit, you know, and I'm back up with all the you know, the beer and food.
It's like for years we were struggling to get phones good enough, like to make the platform of the phone good enough, and now they're there, and the phones become the platform for our lives, for all this health technology, automotive technology, entertainment technology. It's like that transition. We built them up, and now they can build us up.
And iOS obviously was the leader in that, right? With the heart rate monitors and all that sorts of stuff that Apple would bring out on stage, rather, you know, these partners. I remember when, I think it was during the 3G launch event where they had like the heart rate monitor folks
3G,
and sort of
3GS.
Okay, where they had like they had the folks come out on stage for the heart rate monitor and sort of the other accessories market that they started to open up, in car things. I think they even featured TomTom at that event too, and that's what I thought was interesting about the Samsung event, and not even just the event, but the sort of around the event. I started to get press releases, and you see this move by Samsung now to make the Galaxy S line a platform for other accessories. So heart rate monitors.
Lifestyle companion.
Right, your lifestyle companion. I started, you know, the next day after an Apple event, I get hit with tons of press releases from companies that, you know, we got, and I'm sure you do too, with these cases are available now, and we've got this now that for the new iPhone and all of these things. And I never had that level of press release mania from any other Android event until this week with the Samsung Galaxy S4. And I got hit with, you know, we're ready for this on their, you know, use this in your car now with your Samsung Galaxy S4. And so I thought it was an interesting move and a shift.
And it's, I mean, that really plays to Samsung's strength because they are, they make everything. They make appliances. They make all these devices. And on stage, they had Samsung-branded scales and Samsung-branded health bracelets and all these things. And if you think about it, you know, Samsung makes refrigerators. Samsung makes, they could conceivably bake their ecosystem into everything that's in our house. And there's very few companies that manufacture that many things.
And it's great if you think about that. I think there's not like a unified platform. I do get a little frustrated that there's so many apps for so many things, right? I've got the Nest app. So we launched the Nest app to control the heat in our house. I launched the Fitbit app to see how many steps I've taken that day.
I have the Hue app for my lights.
Yeah, you've got the Hue app for your lights, and other people use, you know, for unlocking their car, you know, the Viper or whatever. And so there's no sort of unified experience yet. And I know at CES, I'm sure you saw this as well, there are companies trying to create a unified platform that, you know, if you want to build a garage door opener, you'll build it on our platform. That way it's sort of open. Everyone has access to it. We don't need to have 80 different ways of doing things. Let's just try to come up with one way of doing something.
Yeah, I also thought, and I guess we'll wrap up with this, is that Samsung basically paved over Android. A lot of the software they showed off was not Android software, it was Samsung software. And people get upset because, you know, I won't get the latest update from Google, but they're all using Android like an embedded, like Linux, basically, like an embedded operating system, and they're trying to make their own value. And they have all their own services. And I'm kind of hoping for iOS 7, as much as I'm interested in the iPhone 5S, I'd like to see a lot of stuff in iOS 7. I'd like to see iCloud get really solid, really reliable, you know, fix all the sync issues, that kind of stuff. But it looks like services now are becoming the table stakes. As much as hardware was at one point, software was at one point, we seem to be entering this age of ubiquitous internet services.
Right, we expect our data to be everywhere. I don't know what I would do without Evernote, right? I don't know what I would do without 1Password. And we expect these things. We expect our email to just work. We expect that when we want to launch our music player, if we paid for iTunes Match, that iCloud just works and I get to stream those songs that I've paid for, that they have access to. We want Amazon Cloud Player.
In Dropbox now.
Oh, you do?
I have my entire Mac documents directory all lives in iCloud and Dropbox now, and no matter what Mac I open, it's always the same files.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, we expect you expect that Dropbox is going to work, which is, you know, and actually it's more reliable than iCloud.
Yeah.
Which is remarkable.
In North
and you're
America,
right.
it's not as great outside North America because
really?
North America, well, because Amazon servers are clustered around North America still.
Right. Yeah, I have heard some Europeans complaining about it.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting if you. That stood out to me, of course, and I think stood out to a lot of people during the event, where Samsung only mentioned Android one time, and it was only as they were talking about the security.
Yeah.
And even then, they pointed out that, you know, they basically showed the Samsung Galaxy S4 as more reliable than other Android devices.
Yes.
They were playing off other Android devices. It was fascinating to me, and it was also fascinating. I threw this question hypothetically out the next day, which is Android, does Android belong to Google anymore? Yeah. Is it theirs anymore? And in many ways, what is Android anymore? Is Android the Samsung skin? Is it the HTC Sense skin? Is it Kindle Fire skin? What is Android?
I think Google, in order to make it as popular as they did, were willing to surrender control. They surrendered control to get it spread out as fast and as far as they can. And now an average person, I think, looking at it, you couldn't tell you what Android is. They have their Samsung phone, their HTC phone, or they don't even know that their box runs Android. Like if it's not a phone or a tablet, they might not even know that it runs Android.
Now, I know this is sort of revolutionary or radical thinking and probably way off base, but I couldn't help but wondering, as I was hearing Samsung on stage, is Samsung working on their own operating system? Would they do that? Would they move away from Google altogether? Certain things stood out to me. They're moving away from NFC, where Google is moving towards it with Google Wallet, and Samsung was saying, no, we're going lower-powered Bluetooth. Would they roll out their own operating system? And despite Android, of course, then you have the apps issue, right? Yeah. You've got to, you rely on the Google Play Store. So unless under the hood you made it close enough where developers could port their apps pretty quickly, but is this something that Samsung sees as a necessity? We create our own operating system. We don't need to license Android anymore. And
they're an odd company because they have made Windows phones. They recently said they don't think Windows phones are very popular, but they do make Windows phones. They used to have Bada phones, and now they're working towards Tizen phones, and they're making these huge Android phones and tablets. So it's I don't know if they're hedging their bets, or they like to have skunkworks, or they're preparing for a future where they fork it the way Amazon did, maybe. But it seems like they don't focus on one thing.
Right, and they test in the marketplace a lot more than other people would. So, while Apple, might not release these particular devices, Samsung just throws spaghetti at a wall and sees what works. Does the Note work? Do people want a larger screen? Okay, sure. Yeah, they do want a larger screen. Good. We got lucky on that one.
We'll do every quarter inch, and you'll tell us which ones you like, where Apple will usually wait. But I think that's very core to the difference between Samsung, Android, and Apple, is that, I think we spoke about this a while ago, is that Apple didn't do 3G till the second phone. They didn't do LTE until the iPhone 5. They're really willing to wait on these things and find what they think is a really good solution. So a big phone with poor battery life, they're not going to do it. They'll wait till the next generation chipset. But it's nice to have these companies openly testing all this stuff so that we can see what fails fastest. And maybe Apple can see what fails fastest. So Samsung's willing to take all these hits, and slow-moving companies like Apple can sort of cherry-pick as they come along.
Right. They don't have to take as long to try to figure this stuff out, which is good for the consumer. I mean, I think about this time 3 years ago. I wasn't carrying an Android phone that I cared about. Now I play with the S3 all the time, and it's in my pocket along with my iPhone 5, and I enjoy them both, and I feel like for my job I need to, but usually I was a one phone kind of guy. Not anymore.
Yeah, I had a Nexus 4 and a BlackBerry Z10 in my pocket at the Samsung show.
Yeah, and I've got that plugged in over here, and I've got a Lumia 920 sitting down there as well.
But it's amazing that every company is making at least one great phone now, because that wasn't the case until very recently.
It's true, and now we've got sort of parity, I think, where you've got all of these great pieces of hardware, and it really does come back to your point about services. Yeah. What do I want to rely on? If I'm a Mac person and I want all of these devices to work, then I'm an iCloud person. Yeah. But I also think I'm starting to drift towards Google, Gmail, more and more Google services on my iOS devices. Yeah.
Because you can have them on your Samsung and on your Apple and on your Z10.
And I've really moved away from the Apple Mail client lately. Over the past few weeks, I've really jumped into using the Gmail app on my iPhone and iPad more than I ever had before, and I'm really loving it.
Did you try Mailbox at all? Because that was the other big news this week, that Dropbox bought them.
Yeah, I did not. No. Have you been playing with Mailbox?
We had one of my writers, Allison, looked at it. I just saw the queue line and said, I'm not a fan of that kind of software deployments. I'll wait until there's no queue.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll wait till Dropbox rolls it out with some sort of integration that I can play with, almost like Google Drive. You've got all these things here that you rely on with Dropbox. Want to upload some attachments? You got all your photos maybe kept in Dropbox. Great way to tie those two together. It makes sense.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, and the scary thing is that it's not one of Apple's traditional strengths. So I'm going to be interested in seeing how they embrace this service's future.
Yeah, this has been their biggest, of course, their biggest Achilles heel, and of course we hear about Google is iterating faster on the things that Apple is strong at, and Apple's not iterating fast on the things that Google's strong with. So this next year is going to be fascinating.
It's much easier to buy Snapseed and Sparrow and companies like that than it is to buy massive competence in server-level architecture.
Yeah, true. And build another server farm.
So Clayton, before I let you go, where can people find out more about Read Quick?
Oh, we can go to the website readquickapp.com or jump on iTunes and grab it. We were so far the reviews have been very, very good. We're very excited about that. And this week we just rolled out a partnership with TechMeme.
Nice.
So TechMeme is now a featured partner within the app. So if you love TechMeme and you want to read all the news that's news on the TechMeme feed, just hit that in the featured partners, and you can speed read right through that. But yeah, jump on the iTunes store and grab it. We've got some big things in the works. Slowly but surely.
What I love about it is that for me it almost becomes like how fast can I go, and it doesn't feel like I'm actually improving a skill set. It feels like I'm winning, and that's such a better motivator than just being told to read faster.
I know, and some of the game you point out the gamification stuff in the stats page, you get to see, how, and we're working on some really nice new things with the stats page, so you can see comparisons to big tomes that you may have read in the past, how much you've been reading, but you get to see your featured sources and how many words you've been reading over the past week, and you realize, oh my God, I read 16,000 words this week. So it's been a lot of fun, and your comprehension goes up significantly. Yeah. You'll actually notice that you start out at 300 words a minute, then you're up to 500 words a minute speed reading, and you're like, wait a minute, I remember more, and it is a bizarre feeling.
And English is not exactly the easiest. I mean, we have so many different word origins and so many different syntaxes compared to Scandinavian languages or Italian. English is not the easiest language to get literate in and to get fast in. So anything like this, I think, does double service. It makes us better readers.
And you talked about accessibility. One thing we've been hearing from, and this was totally shocking to me and something we never thought about, but that dyslexics, people suffering from dyslexia, have written to us saying this has changed their life. This is the first time that they're able to read the news. And I was blown away by that. In fact, I sent it to my mom, who's a social worker, and she had like tears. She's like, oh, that's amazing. Because they said it gets rid of all the word noise, and there's just a single word, and for the first time they're able to read news on the web, and that just meant the world to me.
Yeah, I didn't think of that either, but you're creating a focused environment for them, so you're removing everything that is distracting or confusing.
Yeah, so it's been a wild ride. So thanks for the plug.
Readquickapp.com, check it out, and we'll put it in the show notes. And Clayton, I know everyone knows where to find you, but just in case, where can people find out more about you?
Sure, go to foxnews.com. You can click through there. I have all my tech pieces up there that I do once a week or so. And you can always find me on Twitter at Clayton Morris. And I usually try to answer any tech questions. So I go through my feed every day. If anyone has any sort of tech questions, to the best of my ability, I always try to answer them on Twitter.
Yeah, you're phenomenal on Twitter. You're incredibly engaging.
Oh, thank you. As are you.
I try. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I think you do based on your behavior. That we're lucky enough to have an audience, and they treat us like someone who knows we're going to help them with things. And I think there's a little bit of a responsibility to give back to them.
Absolutely, and the beauty of Twitter is that it's better than email. I don't have to spend half an hour trying to type out a long email to someone with a question. They have a specific question on what type of tablet they want to get their husband for Father's Day. I'll tell you, based on this, and this is what you should get. And it's very simple. And I'm able to do a lot more and reach a lot more people using Twitter than I would be on email or Facebook or something like that.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. The expectation is limited to like 160 characters, where even something like Google Plus, they can expect you to write pages, and there's just no time. So Twitter, it works out better for everybody.
Yeah, all around.
Clayton, thank you very much. I know you have a trip to get on. I want to thank you for joining us, and thank you to the chat room. You guys are always great.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You can find me at Rene Ritchie. You can find all of us at iMore. For all of our shows, go to mobilenations.com/shows. If you haven't already, please also go to iTunes, leave us a review, leave us a rating. It helps iTunes know that you like the show, and that encourages them to feature the show, and that helps us get more great listeners and viewers like you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.